Welcome to Women Igniting Change, the place to be for women leaders and decision makers who are passionate about changing the world and determined to act. I'm your host, Robbin Jorgensen, former corporate executive, global speaker, and founder and CEO of Women Igniting Change. Let's dive in. Hello, changemakers. Welcome back to the Women Igniting Change podcast. Today, I have the privilege of introducing you to Susannah Wellford. Susannah is an internationally renowned expert on women in politics, and she's trained over 25,000 women across the U.S. how to run for office. She received the Hills Changemaker Award for 2023. She is a Forbes 50 over 50 honoree and the John W. Kirkendall Award for Community Service. And she's also the CEO and founder of Running Start. Susannah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on, Robbin. I'm excited to talk to you.
I'm excited to dive into this. So let's start with some really great news.
Yes.
St. Paul, Minnesota made history this week by swearing in an all-female, very diverse city council. What message do you think this sends not only to women who are looking to run for office, but to the rest of the country?
Oh my gosh. I don't even think it's just the rest of the country. I think it's the rest of the world.
I'll take that. We have listeners in 30 countries. Yes.
Yeah. And actually, I wanted to say one thing. You said we trained 25,000 in this country, but we actually have a lot of international young women as well. Okay. So St. Paul, I think anytime we do something in politics that shows that it doesn't just have to be status quo, that we are capable of making change and change that is going to really resonate in communities, I think that it sends those ripples all over the country and all over the world. And I really like what these women did in St. Paul. They were intentional about it. They realized that it might happen. They worked together. Like that was one of my favorite things. Like it was a message of we are going to work together to make this happen and then to create change in the way that we legislate. And so, and the fact that they're incredibly diverse. And of course, I'm excited about the fact that they are young women. Is it right? Am I right that they are all under 40?
They're all under 40. Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
amazing.
So before I began Running Start, I co-founded the Women Under 40 PAC to get more under 40 women into Congress. So I am such a believer in let's get women in young so that they can rise up and they'll have real seniority one day, which women don't always have because we start in politics so late.
Yep. So in dedicating your career to empowering young women to pursue political leadership, what was the pivotal moment or experience that inspired you to start this to begin with?
So I actually have given that a lot of thought, over the years. What was it that made me sort of choose this to do with my life? And I actually think that there are a lot of answers and there are a lot of people who pushed me on the way. But I was thinking the other day, it's so funny, just 2 days ago, I was thinking about how in high school, I ran for student government. And I know a lot of people run for student government. It's a very common thing, but I had transferred to a new high school. I was in the 10th grade. And in my old high school, I was the kind of kid who was bullied, who never spoke up. I mean, who just tried to be invisible.
Nose down. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I went to this new high school and I was able to have a clean slate, like a new start. And my friends encouraged me to run for student government. And it's just, the idea that they saw me that way was really life-changing. And I hadn't thought about it until the other day that, the fact that I went in 1 year from being somebody who's just like, don't look at me, to standing up in front of my class and giving this speech. And the reason I think that that's a piece of Running Start's origin story is that a lot of what we do is we encourage and support people's dreams. And it sounds a little bit like we'll give you affirmations, but really when you're trying to do something that other people haven't done, you're trying to do something where often there isn't such a path. Right. You need people to say, I believe that you can do it. I believe in you. And so I think that that's having somebody believe in me at such an early age. It's almost like I never looked back. I'm like, I can be someone different. And these people believe that I can do it.
Yeah, it's like borrowing others' belief in you until you can find that belief in yourself.
Yeah, I like that. Yes, I think that's right.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So your work with Running Start has taken you around the world speaking to
Mhm.
young women and girls about women's leadership and politics. What are some of the
Mhm.
common themes that you hear?
Um, well, I mean, first, it's one of the greatest things, sort of the surprises in my life that my work helping domestic women get into politics has meant that I've been able to travel the world. The State Department sends U.S. speakers abroad, and I've been to maybe 15 different countries through that and other programs. Um, and I have spoken in front of very diverse audiences. So two that I can just think of off, or maybe I should tell you three. One was a classroom of young students in Moscow. One was a group of Sri Lankan villagers who lived in this place that was barely accessible by road,
Oh,
and then I spoke to Bedouin women in Israel back in 2011. So I mean, but of course, then I'm also speaking in Brussels to very sophisticated women. But wherever I go, whenever I'm speaking to women, the problems are the same. The
100.
obstacles are the same, and it's just so fascinating to me. And what, of course, is true is some of those external factors that keep women out of leadership are very different in around the world, but the internal hesitancy towards leadership, or that feeling of I don't know if I'm right for this because nobody's ever told them that they're right for it, and they don't have a lot of role models. That is just you see that all around the world, and I always feel such commonality with the women of the world because we're all dealing with the same thing.
We find that too in the women's leadership programming that we do globally.
Yeah.
Women are women are women
Yeah. Yeah.
everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I caught an interview that you did with Soledad O'Brien where you said that women don't see power as a place where we belong.
Mhm.
Why do you think that is, and how is Running Start trying to address that?
So I spoke to a class at Middlebury College yesterday, and I was asking one of the women, why do you think that women aren't we don't share power equally with men?
Right.
And she said something that I feel like I don't hear very often, but it's just such an obvious thing, which is we haven't been even capable of seeking power for that long. So, if you think women
That's
have had the
true.
right, women have had the right to vote and to run for office since like 1920 in the US, and it seems like a really long time, but then in the scope of history, it's just a blink of an eye. And so we're still figuring out what those paths are. We're still trying to sort of reprogram ourselves. We had so few rights just not that long ago. And now we want to be equal in all things and not just have rights, but we want to be able to write the laws, to make the help to craft the system that we all live by. And in a lot of ways, it's a big jump. So I always think that we should be patient with ourselves. Like, okay, so we wish that all women were like, of course I can lead and I can do this and hard charging, but really, I think we need to be patient with ourselves and understand we have not women in history have not even had the opportunity for power for very long, and we're in an arc going upward, but
Yeah.
we're still not totally there.
Yeah. Let's go back to the St. Paul example for just
Mhm.
a moment. And I'm sure you see this across the board with the women that you help get into government seats. Reading through some of the comments, and there's going to be detractors in any type of
Mhm.
situation, but reading through some of those comments that they were male comments that they were feeling that now they're not represented. Or I know, or
Mhm.
it's not diverse because white male are not on the city council, and I'm like,
Mhm.
you had it for 200 years. Turn. Like, how do you navigate those type of comments, and how do you train the women that you work with to navigate those kind of comments?
One of the things that I do pull out when I'm speaking to men who make comments like that is that if you have diverse leadership, it's better for everybody.
Right.
So, those homogeneous decision makers, they're not making decisions that actually are the strongest for the community. So,
Right.
throw in some different thinkers and people of different backgrounds,
Recipe of plot.
right? Yeah, diversity of thought is so incredibly important and
Yeah.
does help. And so, yeah, and your point that that men have been in those positions forever, it makes me think about the Ruth Bader Ginsburg quote when she was asked how many women should be on the Supreme Court, and she said 9. Right? I mean, so I think, to be honest, like if we want to have the best system, we would have a balance. You
Okay.
know,
Yeah.
and it's funny because even talking about a gender balance now, like gender is so fluid right now, and especially in this country.
Yeah.
But having a real balance of different types of thinkers.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that is what we have to strive for, and it doesn't mean we have to have all women or all diverse women, but it just means let's get new people into power who have not had the opportunity to show us how they would do it.
Yeah. So let's dive into your programming a little bit. So in your programs, you help these young women work on their confidence, their
Mhm.
capabilities, and you also connect them to people with power.
Yeah.
So how does that approach serve them in running for office, and how does that spill over into other aspects of their
Oh, yeah.
lives?
No, that's a great question. And so Running Start, our whole mission is we want women to know that they can run for office, and we want to give them, the skills and the preparation so that they can do it. But, what do you need to run for office? You need to know how to do public speaking. You need to know how to connect to people, how to take the things you're passionate about and get other people to believe in them and to articulate them, well enough so other people will follow you. And those, of course, are leadership skills that you need no matter what you're going to do.
Mhm.
So we found that we have lots of different programs. Some are a semester long. One of our programs called Elect Her is just a day long. And we found that day long program can be as effective as the semester long program.
Wow.
And it's really because sometimes, like what happened to me in 10th grade, where somebody's like, you know what, you should run for office. Oh, by the way, I didn't win that election. I should have said that. I did not win. And
Wow.
it didn't even matter because I was
Still
so
plant
proud
the
of
seed.
myself because
Yeah.
I stood up there. And so the women who come to Running Starts programs, many of them, they have big ideas. They want to change the world. They want to, do something with their lives, but they don't feel like other people are going to accept it, or they don't feel like they're able to be themselves. And so we give them that permission. And so that day long program, which is really only like 3 hours, they come up with some, not come up with, but they articulate something they're passionate about. They do an elevator speech about it. And then they, with the other women in the room, they practice giving the elevator pitch, and we do a campaign simulation. So they have to stand up, say their name, tell the group what
Mhm.
they're passionate about, and then ask people to vote for them. And that's, I mean, it's a simulation, right? Like we're just in a little classroom, but it is
Yeah.
so transformational. And Robin, so obviously, or maybe not obviously, but Running Start works with young women 13 to about 25 or
Mhm.
30. But every once in a while, I get asked to speak to a different group. And I spoke to a local synagogue, and all of the women were like in their 70s and 80s. And they got so much out of it. Because I made them do this. I
Thank
made them like, stand up and give speeches. And a couple of them were like, well, I'm not doing it. Like, well, you really, you should really try. And one of those women won the whole campaign simulation. So
Wow.
I think there is so much power in doing these things that we're so scared of. And especially when it's really putting yourself on the line. Like
Yeah.
you're showing like, what do you care about the most? And why are you a good person to be a change maker in that area?
Yeah. It's really building that internal, not only the confidence, but your sense of self, and
Yeah.
having that be so much stronger than
Yeah.
any noise that's going to come at you that could be negative.
I think so too. I've thought about that so much. And when somebody else believes in you, what you were saying earlier, like you sometimes need other people to believe in you before you figure out how to believe in yourself.
Yeah.
And if you think about like, what are the things that create a successful life? Like resiliency is absolutely one of them.
Yes.
And that's the path to resiliency. Sometimes you need somebody to say, Robbin, I think you're really good at this and you
Right.
should do this thing. And then once you sort of feel solid in your sense of self, you're kind of unstoppable.
Right. Yeah. So we talked a little bit about that diversity of thought.
Mhm.
How do you maintain that nonpartisan approach and
Yeah.
empower women from diverse ideological backgrounds?
Um, yeah, I love that question. So I'll tell you a slightly negative thing, which is that it's gotten harder since 2016. Um,
Yeah.
the country is more polarized, and it's been a little bit harder. But one of the things we've done since our founding in 2007 is we bring diverse groups together. We talk to them about the importance of listening and being open to other viewpoints, not because you're going to change your mind. We know that it's incredibly difficult to change somebody's mind on an issue,
Right.
but just why don't you be curious about why this person feels the way that they
Mhm.
do? And I think that that's the key to creating a better political landscape is if we actually see each other as people and listen and try and be curious about where do these beliefs come from? Because nobody, the vast majority of people who disagree with you, they're not doing it because they don't like you or they're trying to be disagreeable, terrible people. They believe as firmly as you do about the way an
Yeah.
issue should be. So we try through a number of exercises to foster that environment so that it's a safe space to listen and to air your beliefs, even if maybe nobody else in the room believes what you believe. You're going to feel safe doing it. But yeah, a little bit harder since 2016.
Yeah, I was trying to look over on my wall. I have a picture of myself and Dan Rather holding his book, and I can't see.
Oh,
I don't remember the title, but it
yeah.
was something around when you get below the how we approach the topics, we're more alike
Mm,
underneath
yeah.
than not.
Yeah.
So we all want the same things. We just go at it different ways.
Yeah. And
So get
just
to the
being,
core of that. Start there.
yeah. Yes, exactly. And one of our programs, we're doing it slightly differently these days, but one of our programs we have put people in a house together, and it was originally it was 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans, and then you're forced to see people as people and to dig deeper. And I feel like Congress used to be like that. Like they would get to know each other as people, and maybe they wouldn't agree on policy, but they would still go out to dinner together. And
Flexibility
sadly,
is still there.
yeah, but it's that the whole system has changed, as you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. And I make up that the more women we get in
Mhm.
the seats of power, the more that civility will start to return.
I
You
hope
know?
so. Yeah, I really I hope so. And the one of my favorite examples of that is the men play they have these big softball games in Congress, and the men play Democrats versus Republican Congresspeople, men. But the women all play on the same team and they play against the women in the press. So
Wow.
it's kind of nice. And I've heard several stories from congresswomen saying, I don't believe in her what she her policy views, but we're great friends because we play on the softball team together, and
Yeah.
they get to see each other as people. And just personally, Running Start has a really diverse network, and it's diverse in all ways, but ideologically diverse network of people. And so I practice that all the time in my own life, and that's the way it should be, right?
Right.
We have friends and colleagues from
Yeah.
um, all different types of people.
I think, like you said, maintaining that curiosity is key because you
Yeah,
can get triggered, especially in today's,
yeah,
media
yeah,
world here in the United States. We
yeah,
can get triggered pretty quickly, and to take a
mhm,
step back and wait a minute, get curious. What's a
yeah,
different perspective other than looking at it through your own lens?
yeah,
And we all need to do a little bit more of that for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah. So let's dive into the global aspect a little bit. So
Mhm,
we have listeners in 30 countries around the world.
mhm.
Can you discuss the global impact of Running Start's work, particularly in countries like Brazil, Kenya, and
Oh
India,
yeah.
where you've piloted programs of your curriculum?
Yeah, I mean, we're so proud of that. So India is fairly new, but Brazil and Kenya we did with the National Democratic Institute and this group called Women Win, and we have just piloted the program, but it was a huge success. And the U.S. curriculum, I told you earlier, it really focuses on um, come up with what you're passionate about,
Hmm.
practice messaging that, and then stand up and give a speech and tell the world what you think. And um, sometimes culturally, the same things don't work, but it has worked really beautifully so far. So it's young women in Brazil and Kenya, and the results were just totally fantastic. And it goes back to what we were talking about before, that around the world, we're not that different.
Right.
You know, the things that are holding us back are not that different. And that's why our training works for a 13-year-old and it works for an 80-year-old. And it works for, you know, a high school student in the US, and it works for a young girl in Kenya, you know, who's had a totally different life, but we're
Right.
all trying to overcome the same things.
Yeah.
Um, and I think in the US, we have a fairly strong feminist movement or
Mhm.
women's rights movement. In some countries, they don't have that at all, or it's really underground. And so I think when we get students from other countries, or when we go to another country and do our training, it can be, you know, even more eye-opening than it is for the American young women, because, you know, they sometimes say, I've never heard these things before. Nobody has ever questioned the power structure in my country.
Right.
And I never thought that it could be somebody like me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's incredible. I love that.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, it just shows you we need so many groups doing this type of work, which is just holding people's hands and saying, you can do it. Because I think a lot of people feel really alone. They have dreams, but they have no idea how they can make those dreams happen. And so you need to create these groups that will, you know, be people in their corner to support them.
Yeah. So the political landscape globally is evolving and changing almost on a minute by minute basis.
Mhm.
And as well here in the US.
Yeah.
How do your programs adapt to ensure that the trainings remain relevant?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question because so we started in 2007, and our curriculum, I'll tell you the ways that it has evolved,
Yeah.
but the core has stayed the same.
Okay.
And the ways in which we've evolved, I think, have less to do with sort of the what's happening in the
Yes.
world at large, or the world in politics, and more with our realization that we needed to do more to um, create that sense of self that you and I were talking about earlier than we did in the beginning. So in the beginning, we did a lot. It was much more about politics and leadership. And now we have sessions. One of our best sessions is um, articulating your values. So
Mm.
we got this from this wonderful woman, Adrienne Christian, who's a chief of staff on the Hill. And she came in with this list of maybe 50, 60 values, and you have to rank them. And it's everybody's favorite thing that we do, because you really get to thinking about what is important in my life. What are the, you know, where are the places that I want to put my energy and my passion? So we do more things that are cultivating that inner self than we did before. And then the what we were just talking about in terms of fostering an environment where you can have difficult conversations,
Yeah.
um, that has evolved mainly. We've done it since the beginning. The main way that it's evolved is it's become a little harder. So we've had to get a little smarter about how we do it.
In what ways has it become harder?
I think it's become harder. Uh, yeah. I mean, here's what I think. I think that sometimes in the country, we feel like to be a good person, you need to be respectful and listen to other people. I think that um, we are at a point where that's not a given anymore. That even listening to somebody who has a different view is something that is a negative.
Mm.
So it used to be like, okay, I'll be a good person and listen. And now it's like that person, even listening to them say it kind of puts me in jeopardy, which to me is, it's a really bad trend because
Right.
if we close ourselves off and say, I know what I know and I don't want to hear what anybody else knows, you never get smarter. You miss so many things, and that leads to all the walls that we build, not just in politics, but in society in general.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are some surprising trends that you can share with our listeners around women in
Yeah.
politics? Stats or trends?
Surprising trends. I like to give you the positive stuff, but I have kind of a,
Both.
okay, right. I mean, so I have a negative one, and my caveat is that I have not looked at this in a few months, and it's possible that it's changed.
Okay.
I should have looked at this before, but wasn't thinking about it. So what we think with progress is that it's this lovely line that we're always heading towards progress.
Right.
And so I started doing this work really in 1999 when I co-founded the Women Under 40 PAC with this amazing woman named Stacey Fatka Beckerman. It was actually her idea. And then I'm still doing this work today, so it's a really long time. We have, of course, had more women entering politics. I mean, the numbers in 1999 were pretty terrible, and we have, oh my gosh, is it 28%? I think it's 28% women in Congress.
Here in the US. Yeah.
Yeah, less than 30. But I mean, but we're doing really well. But there are two things. One, in the past couple of years, we have plateaued. The numbers are not rising the way they should be, or the way that they were in the earlier parts of at least my life. But the thing that I actually think is more troubling is I looked a couple months ago to see how many women were running for office this year, especially because of Roe, right? So we had this decision that many women feel just viscerally about,
Mhm.
and that it affects their lives. And so it seems that that would be a real catalyst to all sorts of women who maybe have never thought of running for office before saying,
Right.
I got to do it because this is like affecting my life so directly and I have to do it. And at least a couple months ago when I looked, there were fewer women running than in previous years. And that is a really scary trend. And I read one political scientist, her opinion on this, and she said, I think every woman who would have run for office and been catalyzed, by something like this, they already did in 2016 when Trump ran. And there aren't any more women. And if you think about that, I'm not sure that's true. But if you think about that, it really makes a case for running start, right? Because if there aren't women who can be catalyzed by even enormous seismic shifts in, affecting women's rights, we need to start earlier getting young women to see that politics is a place for them.
Do you think that trend of not as many women running is due to the last several years discourse in our country
Yeah.
and the extreme polarization and division that we're now living under? Do you
Yeah.
think that's a factor in that, where they're like, yeah, no, peace out?
Yeah, of course, I think it's a factor. I think that the media can be merciless to women in a different way than they are to men. I think that, it can be really hard to think you can run as yourself, and people often don't want to run if they're not going to be able to be themselves. So, yeah, I think there are a lot of factors, but when as we started the show talking about what's happening in St. Paul, like that's incredibly hopeful because it just shows politics is unpredictable. You can say, okay, well, it's headed this direction, but then at the same time, it's also there are also places where we're rising up and making strides in places that are surprising and amazing. So I think you have to look at the whole of politics and not just look at the negative.
Yeah. So, what is the impact on government and society at large when more women run for office?
Oh my gosh.
I
Okay.
know.
I mean,
Like,
let's go. So there are great studies internationally of, when you have more women, GDP increases, violence decreases, um, corruption decreases tremendously. Some people say, well, if we ever do get parity and have the same number of men and women, then that's going to come right back up. But right now, that's not the case. And I also think, or I mean, this is so obvious, but when you have women in leadership, other women think, oh, I could do it because they have the role models, they have the examples. And so, it's so interesting. Uh, it will be interesting to see what happens in St. Paul. I would think that a lot of young women are looking really carefully and saying, oh, I'm a young woman, I'm a
Yeah,
young woman of color. I could do this thing because look, here are these women. And I have people say all the time, well, I could never run for office. I could never do this. And they think that because there's absolutely nobody of their identity who's doing this. But it's got to be a first.
right.
And then that first inspires so much, so many other people. And I always, you know, a lot of people wonder whether you should run for office if there's just no chance you could win. I was talking on a panel the other day, and this young woman, what?
That's an interesting question.
Yeah, right. But so this young woman was saying, like, I live in this incredibly Republican district, but I'm a Democrat and I'm an LGBTQ woman, and um, should I even think about doing it? And obviously, that's there's a lot that goes into
Right.
that decision, but if she does it, she's a beacon. She's a
Yeah,
beacon for other women like her that, okay, I'm not alone.
right.
And even if she doesn't win, first of all, it's going to help her. She's going to feel like
Yeah,
she's done something. But then second, yeah, it helps to inspire, and it does help. I mean, okay. So the other thing is, so say she runs for, whoops, excuse me. I got too excited. Say she runs for office and she's running against sort of a traditional male candidate, then he has to change the way he campaigns in order to reflect, what she's bringing. So it really does. It has repercussions, and I always think, yeah, if you want to run for office and you've got a good reason to do it, then do it.
yeah. So what advice would you give young women who maybe don't have the opportunity to go through Running Starts programs that are considering running? What are some tangible key advice tips that you would give them?
First of all, there's so many training programs. I mean, there are lots of training programs, and go out there and look in your community. There will be somebody who can help you, most likely. But then the other thing is go do informational interviews with everybody you can who you think can shed light on what this experience is like and might be able to help you. When I was in my teens and 20s, I never asked anybody for help because I thought that was, I don't even know
Kind
what
of
I thought, but
negative.
I never did it.
Yeah,
Yes. But I think, if you want to do this big thing, you're going to need to you're going to need to have a lot of supportive people around you. So work on building that network, not just of sort of mentors and interesting people who could directly help your career, but also find those peers who are going to be those people in your corner, your kitchen cabinet, the people who will say, I think you can do this and I'm going to help you to get there.
love that. So what can organizations and or individuals do to help your mission of contributing to that goal of greater gender balance in politics?
I think one of the big things is to take younger people seriously. Young people, they I work so exclusively with young people, and I actually teach at American University, so I'm working with young men too. And they have so much to say. They have so many ideas about how we should be doing things differently. And it's very, very hard to get anybody to listen to them. So I think, what I really like, I like when somebody's doing a panel or they are having voices speak about something to include young voices. So because I think it's not done. We, think about everywhere on the news and at events and at conventions, like we tend to hear from the same types of people.
Yeah,
But sometimes if you allow the younger generation to have a voice, they can provide that element that is missing of, okay, this is a truly new idea. And this might be a catalyst to something great.
Yeah, for sure. What are your long-term goals for Running Start? If you and I were sitting down
Yeah.
5 years from now, 10 years from now, having a great glass of wine, what's
Yeah.
transpired happened?
Yeah. I mean, okay, I'll tell you what I want. In 50 years, I would love for Running Start to be as ubiquitous as the Girl Scouts. So
Yeah.
so everybody understands, okay, the Girl Scouts, it's all about like, let's help young girls become leaders.
Mhm.
But even in the Girl Scouts actually lately has been doing more of this, but politics is not it's not centered. It's sort of an afterthought. And so many groups that are working on leadership for young girls, nobody talks about politics, right? Ooh, politics, like that's kind of distasteful. So I want to make young women learning about politics something that is everybody understands why it's so important, and you know all the girls in the US are like, well, of course I've got to do that. And then, Robin, maybe 50 years is too long, because then what I want is for us not to need it, because we have parity, and young girls are like, well, of course I could do it. I don't need to go to a training. I know it.
Yeah.
But we're not there.
That's a beautiful vision. I'm going to hold that for you as well.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
good.
where can our listeners learn more about Running Start?
They can go to runningstart.org, and we have lots of programs. And if you're over the age of 35, we have opportunities to mentor and to speak and to come to networking receptions where you can share your knowledge with the young women. So there are lots of opportunities, and they can also email me at Susannah@runningstart.org.
Beautiful. Susannah, thank you so much. This was incredible.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin. Great questions. And I appreciated being on the show.
Yeah, for our listeners, we will have links to Running Start, Suzanne's bio, and all of the things in the show notes, and we will see you back here next time. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to Women Igniting Change. I know creating change matters to you. If you enjoy what we talk about on the show, please take one action today and share it with someone who could benefit from listening. Until next time, keep standing up and speaking out for what matters.